Inside the glass tower of Rutherford Vale, Caleb Marris stood in a conference room where every eye held contempt. Worn blazer, scuffed shoes, single dad with no degree. "You're wasting our time," someone said. His hand touched the door handle to leave. Then the notification hit every screen. Project Atlas collapsed. $20 million gone. A data error their entire team couldn't solve in 18 months. Caleb glanced at the projection screen through the open door. His brain caught something in 5 seconds. "I know where the error is," he said quietly. 3 months earlier, Caleb had been stacking boxes in a warehouse at 2 a.m. when he saw the job posting. Data engineer position at Rutherford Vale. He stared at the screen for a long time before hitting apply. The morning of the interview, he borrowed $60 from his neighbor to buy a blazer from the thrift store. It smelled like mothballs, and the elbows were thin. His daughter Luna sat at the kitchen table eating cereal. 5 years old, dark, coily hair pulled into 2 puffs with pink ribbons. "Be good for Mrs. Calder today," Caleb said, kissing the top of her head. The Rutherford Vale building was all glass and steel. 40 stories of people who belonged there. The receptionist looked him up and down when he gave his name. Her eyes lingered on his worn clothes. "4th floor," she said without smiling. The conference room was cold. 4 people sat behind a long table. Elena Rowan, the CEO, sat in the middle. Dark brown skin, silver locks pulled back elegantly, eyes that gave nothing away. To her left sat Adrian Holt, head of data engineering, kind face with a neat beard. To Elena's right was Talia Rivers, senior HR director. And at the end sat Dr. Nolan Ward, senior data scientist, Stanford PhD. 6 years with the company. 34 years old, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. He was the lead architect on Project Atlas. "Tell us about your educational background," Elena said. Caleb's throat went dry. "I attended Northview University for 3 years. I didn't complete my degree." Nolan leaned forward. "May I ask why?" "My wife got sick. I had to drop out to take care of her. And she passed away 3 years ago. That must have been difficult." Nolan paused. "But help me understand. You're applying for a senior data engineering position at one of the most competitive firms in the industry. No degree, no professional experience. What makes you think you're qualified?" "I've been teaching myself data engineering for 5 years. Every night after work, I've built projects, learned Python and SQL, studied machine learning algorithms. I passed your online assessment test with a 96% score." Nolan's expression warmed slightly. 96. Impressive for a screening test, though that test is designed to filter out completely unqualified candidates, not identify top talent. "I see you work 3 jobs currently. Warehouse loading, delivery driving, weekend retail." "Yes, sir." "Admirable work ethic. But those are jobs requiring physical labor, not analytical thinking. Data engineering at our level requires rigorous training from a top-tier academic program." Caleb pulled out his laptop. "I've built a portfolio. I can show you what I've worked on." He opened his projects. Customer segmentation analysis, predictive maintenance model, recommendation engine coded from scratch. Nolan studied them carefully. "These are good, really, for self-taught work. Better than I expected. But can I point out a few things?" He projected Caleb's code on screen. "This segmentation analysis. You're using k-means clustering, which is fine for basics. But you haven't accounted for the curse of dimensionality. With this many features, your clusters are likely meaningless noise." He clicked to another project. "And this predictive maintenance model. You're using random forest without tuning hyperparameters beyond defaults. Your cross-validation is problematic. K-fold on time series data creates data leakage. Nolan's voice remained kind. These are exactly the mistakes someone makes learning alone without proper mentorship. No judgment. I'm impressed you got this far, but it illustrates why formal education matters. Caleb's face burned. Every word was technically correct. Adrian spoke up. Walk me through how you approach the maintenance model. Caleb explained his reasoning. The problem formulation, the pre-processing, the algorithm choice. Adrian nodded. The approach is sound, even if implementation has issues. That's something we can work with in an entry-level position. Absolutely, Nolan agreed. But Caleb's applying for a senior role. We need people who can lead projects, mentor junior staff, interface with clients who have PhDs. Elena had been silent throughout. Now she spoke. What's your assessment of the Atlas project, Caleb? From what you've seen publicly? I think it's impressive work. The accuracy numbers are strong. Nolan nodded appreciatively. Thank you. I led the development. 18 months of work with 8 PhD-level data scientists. Though I did wonder, Caleb added quietly, about the baseline assumptions in the active user definition. It looks like engagement is measured primarily through login frequency. Something shifted in Nolan's eyes. That's correct. Industry standard. I just thought login frequency doesn't always correlate with actual engagement. Someone could log in daily because of automated reminders, but never really use the product. We account for that through secondary metrics, Nolan replied smoothly. Session duration, feature interaction depth. It's all in the technical documentation. Elena stood. Thank you for coming in, Caleb. We'll be in touch. Nolan walked him to the door. Best of luck with your job search. If you're interested in formal education, I could recommend some good online master's programs. He paused. You know, I understand the hunger to prove yourself. I did it the right way, through the system, because the system exists for a reason. Sometimes the best thing we can do is recognize our limitations. Not everyone is meant for this level of work. 2 days later, the rejection email arrived. Caleb deleted it and went back to his warehouse job. 3 months passed. Then his phone rang. Mr. Marris, this is Elena Rowan from Rutherford Vale. We have an opening. I'd like you to come in tomorrow. Elena met him in the lobby personally. The position is yours if you want it. Junior data engineer, $65,000 annually. Not senior level, but it's a foot in the door. Caleb's head spun. Yes, absolutely. She led him upstairs to an open floor plan. You'll sit here. Adrian Holt will be your direct supervisor. Prove yourself, and there's room to grow. She handed him a folder. Welcome to Rutherford Vale. An hour later, Nolan appeared at his desk. Caleb, welcome to the team. Elena mentioned she hired you. I'll admit I was surprised. But she's the boss, and she clearly sees something in you. He pulled up a chair. I'm leading a project that could use support work. Data cleaning, basic validation. The project is Atlas. We're expanding it for a major retail client. $20 million contract. I'll have Adrian assign you to my team. Sounds great. Perfect. Oh, and Caleb, I don't hold the interview against you. That criticism of your portfolio, that was me doing my job. But now that you're here, I'm rooting for you. Over the next 3 months, Caleb threw himself into the work. He arrived early, stayed late, learned everything. Nolan assigned him tasks daily. Data cleaning, validation checks, documentation updates. Grunt work, but necessary. Nolan was always friendly, always encouraging. But Caleb started noticing patterns. When he'd find a potential issue in the data and bring it to Nolan, the concern would be acknowledged graciously. Then, nothing would happen. Good catch. Let me look into that. Weeks later, the issue remained. When he'd suggest an improvement, Nolan would listen thoughtfully, then explain why that approach wouldn't work in their context. Then came the team meeting in month 2. Nolan was presenting Atlas progress to senior leadership. Our retention model is performing beautifully, Nolan announced. 91% accuracy across all customer segments. He clicked to a slide showing model architecture. We've implemented several innovative features: device-level tracking capabilities, enhanced engagement scoring, predictive churn flags. Caleb's stomach went cold. 3 weeks ago, he'd written a memo to Nolan suggesting device fingerprinting to catch duplicate accounts. Nolan had said it was worth exploring eventually, but not a priority. Now it was in the presentation as an implemented feature. 2 months ago, Caleb had proposed engagement scoring based on product usage rather than just login frequency. Nolan had explained why that wouldn't work. Now it was in the model. After the meeting, Caleb approached Nolan. The device fingerprinting feature, that's similar to what I suggested in my memo, right? Nolan looked genuinely puzzled. Oh, the memo. Right. You might have planted a seed there. That's the beauty of collaborative work. Ideas come from everywhere, get refined through discussion. You're part of that process now. Caleb went back to his desk. He checked the commit history for the device fingerprinting feature. Author, Nolan Ward. No mention of Caleb's memo. He could raise this issue. Go to Adrian or Elena. But what would he say? That he'd suggested ideas in informal memos? He had no proof, and Nolan had a PhD from Stanford and 6 years at the company. Caleb was a junior engineer with no degree who'd been there 2 months. Caleb said nothing. Instead, he started keeping detailed notes. He documented everything. At home, he wrote his real observations about the Atlas project, things that didn't add up. By month 3, the pattern was clear. Nolan took Caleb's ideas, refined them, presented them as his own. You're really developing as an engineer, Nolan would say. You're learning to think like we do. Then came the morning when everything broke. Caleb arrived at the office to find chaos. People rushing between conference rooms, phones ringing constantly. He caught Adrian in the hallway. What's happening? Adrian's face was drawn with worry. Atlas collapsed. The client pulled the contract. 20 million gone. What? Why? They hired an external auditor who found critical errors in our methodology. They're threatening to sue for misrepresentation. The emergency meeting was packed. Elena stood at the head of the table, her expression carved from ice. Our client terminated the Atlas contract this morning. They've provided a detailed audit showing that our 91% retention accuracy is actually closer to 68%. The discrepancy stems from fundamental errors in how we defined active users and filtered duplicate accounts. She let that sink in. This is the biggest failure in this company's history. $20 million. Our reputation. Everything is now in question. Nolan, you're the technical lead. Explain. Nolan stood smoothly. Elena, I'm as shocked as everyone else. We followed standard methodology throughout development. Multiple rounds of peer review. Everything indicated the model was sound. Then how did we miss a 23-point accuracy gap? The error is in data pre-processing, specifically how we filtered duplicate accounts and defined engagement metrics. We used email-based deduplication, which is industry standard. We measured engagement through login frequency and session metrics. Also standard practice. If it's all standard practice, why did the auditor find it insufficient? Because they're applying different standards than we learned in academic training. I built this model using the same methodologies I published papers on. If there's a flaw, it's systemic to the entire field. He sounded reasonable, rational. But Caleb saw something else. The slight shift in posture, the calculated pause before each answer. Nolan was covering, and Caleb knew why. 3 months ago, Caleb had suggested device fingerprinting to catch duplicate accounts. Nolan had dismissed it, but in the presentation, Nolan had claimed it was implemented. He'd lied to leadership about having that feature. Stolen Caleb's idea in name only, never actually building it. 2 months ago, Caleb had questioned whether login frequency was a good proxy for engagement. Nolan had explained why the current approach was sound. 1 month ago, Caleb had written a detailed memo outlining potential biases in the active user definition. Nolan had said they'd revisit it later. All of those suggestions would have caught the errors. Nolan had ignored every single one, because implementing them would mean admitting that someone without credentials had spotted flaws in his work. Caleb sat there, hands clenched. He could speak up right now, but he had no proof that would hold up. His memos were informal. It would be Caleb's word against Nolan's. Elena would never believe him. The meeting continued. Nolan positioned himself as the expert trying to diagnose an unprecedented failure. We need to identify the root cause. I'll lead a forensic analysis. Give me 48 hours. Elena considered this. 48 hours. Then I want a full report. Nolan caught Caleb at the door. I'm going to need all hands on deck. Can you pull the raw data logs from the past 6 months? Caleb nodded. Sure. He went back to his desk. He pulled up the data logs. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out his notebook, the one where he'd been documenting observations about Atlas for 3 months. Every suggestion Nolan had dismissed, every warning flag ignored, every shortcut taken. It was all there, detailed, time-stamped, including dates of his memos to Nolan. Caleb could go to Elena right now, show her the notebook, prove that the Atlas failure wasn't bad luck. It was negligence born from pride and ego. But what would happen then? He might be vindicated, or he might be seen as the guy who threw his mentor under the bus, the junior engineer who hoarded information instead of escalating it. He'd probably lose his job either way. He couldn't afford to lose this job. Luna depended on him. $65,000 a year was more than he'd ever made. It was health insurance and stability. Through the glass wall, he saw Nolan pointing at the projection screen, making his case. Still the brilliant expert. Still covering his tracks while other people paid the price. A junior engineer walked past, carrying a box of belongings. Her eyes were red. What happened to Janelle? Caleb asked Adrian. Budget cuts. Elena's making moves already. If we can't fix Atlas, there'll be more layoffs. Caleb sat there feeling sick. People were losing their jobs, and he had information that could help. Locked in a notebook he was too afraid to share. He thought about Luna, about stability and health insurance and keeping his head down. Then he thought about Janelle carrying her box, about the other engineers who might lose their jobs because Nolan was too proud to admit he'd ignored warnings. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out his notebook. His hand was shaking as he stood up. He walked toward the conference room. Every step felt wrong. He could turn around right now, keep his job. But the company was dying because of lies and ego. Caleb knocked on the conference room door. Nobody heard him. He knocked louder. Elena turned. What I know why Atlas failed, Caleb said. His voice came out steadier than his hands. And I can prove it. The room went silent. Nolan's face went pale, then red. Caleb, this isn't the time. I have documentation. Caleb looked at Elena. 3 months of memos and suggestions about problems in the Atlas model. Problems that would have prevented this failure if they'd been addressed. Elena's eyes narrowed. What kind of documentation? Caleb opened his notebook. Device fingerprinting to catch duplicate accounts. I suggested it 3 months ago. Nolan said it wasn't a priority. Then, in the month 2 presentation, he claimed it was already implemented. But it wasn't. He lied about having that feature. He turned the page. Enhanced engagement scoring based on product usage instead of just login frequency. I raised concerns 2 months ago. Nolan explained why the current approach was sufficient. Another page. Biases in the active user definition that would inflate retention numbers. I wrote a detailed memo 1 month ago. Nolan said we'd revisit it later. He looked at Nolan. Every single issue the auditor found, I flagged it. You dismissed all of them, and you lied to leadership about implementing at least one. Nolan's composed facade cracked. Those were questions from a junior engineer trying to understand our methodology. I was mentoring you. You're mischaracterizing. I have the emails, Caleb replied quietly. Time-stamped, with your responses. Elena held out her hand. Let me see that notebook. She flipped through pages, read his entries, cross-referenced dates. The room was silent. When Elena looked up, her expression had changed. Nolan, you received these warnings? They weren't warnings. They were yes or no. Nolan's jaw clenched. I received memos from Caleb raising various questions. Yes. Did you implement any of his suggestions? Some were incorporated into later iterations, before or after the client audit. Silence. Before or after, Nolan? After. Elena closed the notebook. You ignored warnings from your team member. Warnings that would have prevented a $20 million failure. And when that failure happened, you positioned yourself as the expert investigating what went wrong, rather than admitting you'd been told what was wrong months ago. I'm the technical lead. I've published papers on this subject. Caleb has no formal education. I used my judgment to evaluate his suggestions against established methodological standards. Your judgment cost this company $20 million. Elena's voice was sharp. Your credentials don't give you the right to ignore valid technical concerns because they came from someone you don't consider your peer. She turned to Caleb. Why didn't you escalate this? Caleb met her eyes. Because I'm a junior engineer with no degree who's been here 3 months. Who would have believed me over him? The truth of that hung in the air. Elena was quiet for a moment. You should have escalated anyway. To Adrian, to me. Hoarding this information while the project failed doesn't make you a hero. It makes you complicit. The words hit hard. Caleb nodded slowly. You're right. I was afraid of losing my job. I was wrong. Yes, you were. But at least you're admitting it now, which is more than I can say for some people. She looked at Nolan. You're off the Atlas project. Administrative leave pending full review. Adrian will take over as technical lead. Clear your desk. Nolan stood there, his carefully constructed image crumbling. Then he turned and walked out. Elena turned to Caleb. You have all the documentation on what should have been fixed? Yes, ma'am. Good. You're now assigned to work directly with Adrian on the Atlas remediation. We need your technical insights to rebuild this model properly. And from now on, if you see a problem, you bring it to leadership immediately. Understood? Understood. The next 72 hours were brutal. Adrian was everything Nolan hadn't been. Collaborative, willing to listen. Together with two senior engineers, they tore apart the Atlas model and rebuilt it from the ground up. Device fingerprinting to catch duplicates, proper engagement scoring. All the things Caleb had suggested months ago, finally implemented. Caleb worked 18-hour days. Luna stayed with Mrs. Calder. He called her every night to say goodnight. On the third day, Elena called Caleb into her office. The client agreed to a meeting. They'll review our new model tomorrow. If they're satisfied, they'll reinstate the contract. If not, we're looking at litigation. Caleb's stomach dropped. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. You'll present the technical findings. Adrian will present the remediation plan. Me? Present to the client? You identified the problems. You designed the solutions. Think you can handle it? Caleb thought about the borrowed blazer and the interview where he'd been dismissed. Yes, I can handle it. The client meeting was tense. Gareth Silvers, the CEO, sat at the head of the table with his technical team. They all looked skeptical. Elena made brief introductions. Mr. Marris will walk you through what went wrong and how we've fixed it. Caleb stood, connected his laptop to the projector. 3 months ago, this company told you your retention rate was 91%. That number was based on flawed methodology that was flagged multiple times during development. Those flags were ignored. This is why that was a mistake, and how we've corrected it. He walked them through everything. The duplicate account problem, the engagement metric issues. No excuses, no blame shifting, just clear technical explanation. Then he showed them the new model, the fixes, the validation testing. Gareth's technical team asked hard questions. Caleb answered them honestly. When he didn't know something, he said so. After 45 minutes, Gareth held up his hand. Let me confer with my team. They stepped out. 10 minutes later, they returned. Your new model addresses our concerns. The methodology is sound. We'll reinstate the contract with one condition. Caleb Marris is assigned as the lead technical consultant on our account. We want someone who actually listens to problems. Elena didn't hesitate. Done. Later that evening, Adrian found Caleb at his desk. Congratulations. You just saved the company. Nolan's the one who almost destroyed it. Adrian nodded slowly. Nolan's brilliant, but brilliance without humility is dangerous. He couldn't accept that someone he considered beneath him might see things he missed. That pride cost us everything. You know the difference between you two? You were willing to admit when you didn't know something. Those qualities matter more than any degree. The next morning, Caleb found a note on his desk from Elena. My office, 9 a.m. Elena gestured him in. Close the door. I owe you an apology, she said. I hired you because I saw potential. But I put you in an environment where that potential was being exploited. I should have noticed what Nolan was doing. You gave me a chance when no one else would. It's not enough. It's the bare minimum. I built this company on the principle that talent matters more than pedigree. But we started prioritizing credentials over contribution. People like Nolan flourished because they had the right background, while people like you had to fight 3 times as hard for half the recognition. She paused. That's going to change. I'm implementing new policies, anonymous technical review processes, regular audits of who gets credit for innovations. That sounds good. You helped me see what was broken. Also, your salary is being adjusted to reflect your new role. $110,000 annually, effective immediately. Caleb's mind went blank. Thank you. You earned it. Now get out of my office. You have a $20 million project to manage. Caleb stood, then stopped. Ms. Rowan, why did you hire me back? After I was rejected the first time? Elena was quiet for a moment. Because I read the notes from your interview. Nolan wrote that you were technically adequate, but lacking institutional rigor. Adrian wrote that you had unconventional thinking that could be valuable with proper mentoring. I trusted Adrian's instinct over Nolan's credentials. Sometimes the people who fought the hardest to get in the room are the ones who see things others miss. He drove to Mrs. Calder's apartment and picked up Luna. She ran to him with arms wide. Daddy, Mrs. Calder said you're super important at work now. I'm just doing my job, sweetheart. Is it a good job? Do you like it? He thought about the past 3 days. The moment when he'd walked into that conference room, knowing he might lose everything. Yeah, he said. I like it a lot. They got ice cream, 3 scoops each. Luna got chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. They sat on a bench watching the sunset. Luna's head rested against his shoulder. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. Caleb's throat went tight. Thank you, Luna. That means everything. 6 months later, Project Atlas was running smoothly. Caleb had delivered 3 more successful projects. Luna had her own bedroom. Caleb had learned something important. The system wasn't broken because it let people like Nolan in. It was broken because it made people like Nolan believe their credentials made them infallible. The real victory wasn't proving Nolan wrong. It was proving that competence comes in many forms, from many paths, and that the most dangerous people in any organization are those too proud to learn from someone they consider beneath them. Not every day was easy. Some colleagues still questioned his background. But proving yourself was a daily practice, not a one-time achievement. He heard that Nolan landed at a startup, probably still brilliant, probably still dismissive of anyone without the right pedigree. But that was Nolan's story. Caleb had his own story now, and it was just beginning.